You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. My name is Dennis. I live in a mobile home in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. One of the areas that I want to improve on my website is my collection of vegetable side dishes. There are very few there. And when I mentioned this to a friend, he came up with a brilliant idea. He said, why not come up with recipes for icky green vegetables, his words, that most people don't like. And he brought this up because he really loves my Brussels sprouts. A lot of people don't like Brussels sprouts. He says my Brussels sprouts is one of the few vegetables that he actually gets cravings for. So what I want to do today is I want to do a broccoli recipe. A lot of people don't like broccoli, but I want to make a sauce for it. Do I want to do a Hollandaise sauce? I don't think a Hollandaise sauce would be quite appropriate. A Béarnaise sounds good, but the problem with Béarnaise is it has vinegar in it, and I'm not crazy about the flavor of vinegar. So I thought, what if I were to come up with a sauce that's close to a Béarnaise, using almost all the same ingredients, but rather than using vinegar, use fresh lemons. Lemon juice, this is from my neighbor's tree. I think that might make a good sauce to go over broccoli. So let's start cooking. I need about 1/4 cup or 60 milliliters of lemon juice. Although these lemons often don't yield a lot of juice, I know I'm going to get enough juice to end up with 60 milliliters or 1/4 cup. This also gives me an excuse to use my wooden citrus juicer. I like to use fresh lemons where I can. One of my neighbors has a lemon tree and she doesn't use the lemons, so she tells me, please come pick lemons whenever you need them, because otherwise they just fall on the ground and rot and she has to throw them in the trash. So why not? This is one of the reasons why I love living in Southern California. Neighbors who have lemon trees in their yard. Here it is February. No, it's March 1st today. And I can walk over to a neighbor's yard and get fresh lemons off of her tree. That's plenty. That's more than enough. So there's my lemon juice. Going to clean up my mess here and continue on. If you wanted to make a classic Béarnaise, don't use lemon juice. Just use vinegar. A white wine vinegar or a tarragon vinegar would work very well. I need 1 tablespoon of minced shallots. You can also use green onions. This is going to give me more than enough. This is about 2.3 ounces or 65 grams. So I'm just going to mince up what I think I need and measure out a tablespoon and discard the rest, because this shallot is getting rather old. It's been on my kitchen counter for a while. And let me get a bowl out. Yeah, see, that's way more than enough for a tablespoon of shallots. Okay, so there's my shallots. In my sauce, I need 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh tarragon. I can leave the stems in this and chop that up with it, because this is all going to get strained out of the sauce later on. So I'm just going to do a fairly fine chop here. Stems and all. Another reason why, well, this has nothing to do with California, I'm sure, but in the stores today you can buy fresh herbs. This was unheard of when I was a child growing up in New England. Everything was dried and in bottles. I don't think Mom ever bought fresh garlic even. She just used garlic powder from a jar. If you're not familiar with fresh tarragon, it has a scent similar to anise or licorice. That's good enough. And that'll be way more than 2 tablespoons. Well, maybe not quite. Let's measure that just to be sure. There's 1. Actually, that's perfect. Look at that. Going to use all of that. So there's my tarragon. I've got a small pan here that I'm going to use to reduce my liquid. So again, I need about a 1/4 cup or 60 milliliters. That's pretty much all of that. I got exactly what I wanted out of that lemon. And then an equal amount of dry vermouth. You could use dry white wine if you wanted. I don't have any, but I do have vermouth, so I'm going to use that. And then my shallots, chopped tarragon, a good pinch of salt, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, and then I'm going to grind some black pepper in there. I'm going to put this on the stove, bring this up to a boil, and reduce this until nearly all of the liquid has evaporated. So I've got my little pan now here over medium heat. And I'm going to bring this up to a boil, as I said, and then just keep this simmering until most of the liquid has evaporated. My sauce has reduced quite a bit there, my liquid. I'm going to strain that into a small pan. And then, while it's still warm, I'm going to beat in 2 tablespoons of cold butter. And I may need to warm this to melt a little bit more of that butter. I'm going to see what I end up with here. If I can't get the butter to melt anymore, I'll warm it over the stove just a little bit. There are a couple of reasons why I'm working cold butter in at this point. One is it cools that liquid down, so there's no risk that I might cook my egg yolks and have that scrambled egg sort of look in there, which ruins the mixture. You got to throw it out, start again. And if I remember correctly, it was in a French chef video by Julia Child, one of the old ones, in which she was making Hollandaise and Béarnaise. I think she said by putting a little bit of butter in first before the egg yolks go in, that adds another level of protection to protect those egg yolks from scrambling when you go to thicken them later on. I might need to watch that video again. I did not need to heat this over the stove. Most of that butter melted. I have some small beads of butter in there, but that's fine. My next step now is I'm going to beat some egg yolks to add to this. I took a little taste of that base liquid that I'm going to be using for my sort of Mock Bearnaise sauce. It's got a nice kick to it from the lemon juice and the shallots and tarragon. So that's the liquid now that's going to be the base for my sauce. Now I have to thicken it up just like you would a Hollandaise sauce. And for that, I'm going to use egg yolks and butter. My next step now is to whisk up some egg yolks. These are 3 egg yolks from large eggs. Get all of that in there. And then I'm going to use my electric battery-powered whisk here to beat these until they just start to thicken a little bit, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Returning now to my base liquid for my sauce, I want to stream this in while I'm beating it at the same time. So there's my liquid now. This is my egg yolk mixture. My next step now is to thicken this by setting up a double boiler. A double boiler is a safer way to cook delicate liquids so that you don't overcook them. You saw that I had egg yolks in there. If I were to cook that to too high of a temperature, the egg yolks would cook and it'd end up with this sort of curdled looking liquid. It's ruined. There's nothing you can do. You got to start all over again. I use a double boiler. Some cooks do it right over the flame of a stove. Julia Child did it in her French chef recipes. She was confident. She never had any problems. I'm just not going to take any risks. With a double boiler, what you're cooking over is hot, bubbling water. That's not going to get up above 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius. The flame of a stove gets up to hundreds and hundreds of degrees. You can easily heat something up to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So I prefer to work with a double boiler so that I'm working with a safe temperature. So here's my simple setup for a double boiler. I have a little bit larger pan on the stove. The water in there now is just coming up to the boil. Here is my egg yolk mixture. I'm just going to set that in there over the heat and just stir this constantly while that boiling water is heating this up. My interest is not really cooking the eggs fully. I want to heat this up until the eggs just start to cook, the egg yolks, and that will thicken. And as soon as that liquid starts to thicken, take it off the heat. Again, because if you overdo it, you'll cook it and you'll end up with scrambled eggs. Useless. You got to start all over again. So there is my thickened egg yolk mixture. You can see how that's just lightly thickened. As soon as that started to thicken, I got it off the heat because 5 seconds longer might have been enough to ruin it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start beating in butter a little at a time. I have here 1/2 to 2/3 of a cup of melted butter. That's about 120 to 160 milliliters of melted butter. And then working with my whisk and a little bit of butter at a time, I'm going to whisk in my butter until I incorporate it fully. You don't want to dump it in all at once because it won't come together. And you want to make sure that it's thoroughly incorporated before you add more butter. So I'm adding maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons of melted butter at a time, and you can see that's coming together. I'm not getting a broken mixture. So there is my finished sauce. You can see how beautifully smooth that is, a little bit thick. I tasted this. It sort of tastes a little bit like Hollandaise because of the butter and the lemon juice, but it also has a sharp flavor to it from the shallots and the tarragon. So it has that strong Béarnaise flavor to it as well, without that sour acidity of vinegar that I don't like. So now I'm going to cover this and set this aside. I can warm this over warm water later on before I put it over my broccoli. My broccoli and that Mock Bearnaise sauce I'm going to eat as a side dish for some steaks that I'm going to make. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my steaks. I'm not going to show you all of that because I have a separate video and recipe about that. But once that's all done, then I'm going to plate the food and we'll see how good my broccoli looks and tastes. I'm heating a skillet with pure olive oil. That's cooking olive oil, not extra virgin olive oil. Save your extra virgin olive oil for flavoring. And I'm going to saute my broccoli florets here until they're tender. This is probably going to take 6 to 8 minutes. And then I will be ready to plate. Okay, so how I would plate this. There's a nice piece of my steak with beautiful bar marks in it. And then here is my mushroom sauce. Plenty of that over the top. Just like that. And then some of my sautéed broccoli. I do like broccoli. And then finish that with some of my sort of Béarnaise sauce. Just like so. The last step is to see how good that tastes. Oh, that looks so good. I'll cut off a nice small piece for myself. Wonderfully pink inside. Get some of my sauce and those mushrooms. Oh my goodness, that is so good. Not only is the meat tender, but that sauce is so rich and delicious. I gotta try my broccoli with the sort of Béarnaise sauce on it. See, pan sautéed broccoli. Okay, maybe you don't like broccoli, but make a nice sauce for it. You can taste the citrus in that. You can taste the tarragon. You can taste the butter. That is just a fantastic plate of food. So excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my beef tenderloin with mushroom sauce and my broccoli with a sort of Béarnaise sauce. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.